Welcome to the Hour of Power. Something like that. Anyway, somebody made some comment about video cutting off. Yes, the video's cut off when I go more than 58 minutes or whatever it is, because that's all that the memory on the camera is at the moment. And I'm not choosing to delete a few files to make it longer, because longer videos are even more insane. So anyway, I'm going to go through some comments. So obviously I will misidentify some words and whatnot, just because these people just keep talking in their magic talk. They use their magic words. So we're really just at this point where I've made this argument before that the truth isn't complicated at all. Dirt simple. And I've sort of argued that, I sort of noticed, I found that out with physics, right? That we had all this complex nonsense going on. All this, entanglement and photons riding on waves, floating on this, having that, having all these components that they don't have. All this complexity, it's just bullshit. That's all. So if you take the bullshit out, you can see it. So if you're not distracted by what your Pope told you to think, Hume, or some other asshole, Nietzsche, then you can think. But if you got a bunch of crap in your head, you can't think. So, clearly there's a bunch of people who have read some bullshit somewhere that just, some mumbo jumbo that makes some silly comparisons, probably like, oh well, because they were wrong about gays being evil or demonic or possessed by the devil, therefore everything, including the round earth, is somehow a lie. It's almost that kind of ridiculous. So because human beings have a bunch of agenda based on their personal interests, subjective taste, if they can somehow engineer it, kind of a thing. Like they like, let's say they like strawberry cake and they don't like chocolate cake. And they're just trying to engineer that somehow at the wedding or whatever, they're going to be serving strawberry cake. They have they had their interest, they're going to make their interest realized because they're going to sound like a whisper to the bride, chocolate is dark, or something like that. They'll do something, they'll have a picture like of a black man on a wanted poster. Chocolate cake's like that. Does it scare you? I mean, it's the propaganda of politics, the propaganda of all this shit, because people have this personal interest. And so because people have been guilty of this crime of personal interest, therefore there's no such thing as reality that doesn't have something to do, statements of fact, that somebody hasn't corrupted with their personal interest. They can't just make an observation, some sort of Spockian thing, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one. I don't even go for that anyway, because the word needs is silly. See, that's the whole problem. We need subjectively, and often what we identify as what we need is some sort of conclusion based on subjective bigotries or prejudices. When what we actually need, I could say like, I need to have sex with that bitch. But what I could really say is, I need to be comfortable. I need to expel myself of the necessity, the urge, the itch. I need to scratch an itch. And that's really all I need to do. Or I need to just make the itch go away. Now nobody likes to just say that. I need to kill my boner. Because that doesn't sound like much fun. You don't want to kill the boner, you want to satisfy the boner. But the point is you can identify the real thing. You don't have to fall for the crap. It's like the salmon swimming upstream. He doesn't swim upstream because he understands what's happening. He swims upstream because he has a compulsion. And if he was educated, if he didn't learn about evolution and DNA molecules and all this kind of stuff, he would understand, oh, I'm just being fucking compelled. I'm being tricked by the DNA molecule to reproduce. Even though I never voted for that. Even though I'd never voted for oh yeah, let's make 1 billion babies so most of them can die so one of them can swim back up this stupid fucktarded stream and make a bunch of other slaves to this stupid game. You see? But there is a real perspective. There is a universe to be described. And these assholes, and that's what they are, they're just idiots, right? It's because some asshole said something silly like, there's no such thing as real good and bad. Everything's the same. It doesn't matter. You could torture every single thing in the universe and it just doesn't matter. I mean, it's just stupid not to acknowledge that it has to matter because I feel it. I know it matters. It would just be ludicrous for me to say, oh yeah, I vote for make 1 trillion clones of me and torture them forever. Like I said, even imbecile religious kooks would understand that that's the same thing as saying, make 1 trillion of me and send them all to hell forever. I mean, it's nonsensical on its face. It's just completely inconsistent with the fact of conscious experience and the fact that we understand the difference between being really comfortable and being really uncomfortable. And it's a value difference. Whew. But anyway, like I said, there's no... I mean, once bullshit is in, it's hard to extract it, and that's this game we're playing here. Is how do you knock down their little poops, their little popes, and that's all this is about, is that the Pope says so, but the Pope says so, but the Pope, and that's all they're doing. Don't you love Jesus? No. Yeah, I don't even know how to, so, the only way that this worked for these idiots, the Nietzsche-style jackasses and morons, is that they were too stupid to realize, yes, there is a tiny sliver of reality. Most material reality, all the, like, 99.9999999% of the matter in the universe has no oughts. It is not value rich. Nothing happening here. As much as it might look like it's something to look at, and it might have it has a shape, it has writing in it, it's nothing to see here. Nothing's happening. Nothing, no needs, no urgencies, no importance, no anything. But there's this tiny sliver of the material universe that's conscious, that's running a projector, okay, with a screen, and there's a real movie playing in there. I mean, it's a real representation of a movie. It's got real components. It's like sound or vision. We know that vision isn't reality. Okay, we know that there are photons bouncing off of things. We don't see the thing, we see the photons bouncing off the thing. We don't. Sound is just vibrations in a medium. It's not. There's no. Everything has been translated into some sort of thing that has a component of consistency with the thing that produced it. But that's it. There's just a component of consistency. And we're taking those components, and our brain is creating reality out of that. Our perception, our sense perception is an illusion. Vision's an illusion. Hearing's an illusion. Touch is an illusion. We know we don't touch the thing with our fingers. We're touching it with our brain. We're feeling it with our brain. And it's all illusions. And so the fact that feelings are another sixth sense, let's call them, seventh sense, eighth sense, it doesn't matter. We sense pain. We sense comfort, discomfort. We sense it. It's a sense created, okay, the obnoxious sense. I mean, I know it doesn't sound, there's probably a better word for it, but it's this value sense. Okay, we sense value by having a feeling. Now, we all know that sometimes our senses are good at perceiving reality, sometimes they're bad. I mean, it's an old blind man story, feeling up the elephant, and drawing conclusions based on insufficient information. So we know our senses can be fooled. And obviously our value sense, our intuitions, whatever you want to call that, yeah, can be completely idiotic. We can be horny for something silly, like somebody winning a gold medal or the Mets winning the World Series or some crap. That hasn't any real value. We're just addicted to it. So our sense engine drives us to it, just like having a penis. And you can understand that the penis is making you do things, right? The agenda of the DNA molecule. And I'm not saying you deny the senses you're feeling, but I'm just saying there's no point in denying the fact that that motivational mechanism is strong, but there's also no point in saying it's always accurate, and that you can understand the underlying mechanism and why it exists. So the manifestation of value, as I've pointed out, is really just a way for this mechanism to project values consistent with this evolutionary model. But again, the argument is that we know that about intelligence, that rudimentarily intelligence existed as a selfish tool, and it became selfish to be tribal, familial and tribal. These are DNA important mechanisms. But true altruism has nothing to do with it, or or being logical. Admitting the best man should win, and then sometimes recognizing, hey, that guy's DNA is better than mine. Okay, why should I fight him? He is better. You just concede, to a truth. And that's not our nature. Okay, but it's our capacity. We have the capacity to understand. We have, unlike a salmon, we can understand what the stream is. We can understand what the product of our going upstream will be, squirt death, and we can rationally assess whether maybe I should just go back out to sea and swim around some more. So anyway, yeah, so I guess that's contextually, these moral nihilists might as well be reality nihilists, because they're evacuating from reality the most significant thing in reality. I mean, obviously, this brain thing is so much more important than all this superfluous crap. The rest of material reality is nothing compared to the something going on in consciousness. In my opinion, that's just an undeniable statement. It's just you can't rationally refute this argument. That this is like the difference between I don't know, a magnetic metal and non-magnetic or something. I mean, one of them has a property that's just significantly different, and it's different in a really big way. Alright, I guess that's enough context, and we'll just play with some of this, and I'll just try to keep going back to this basic recognition that where the flaw is here is that they had a reality to describe, and they just didn't do the work, the detailed work. So they assumed that everything was just meaningless crap, and they just didn't recognize that there's this tiny percentage of material reality that's involved in this conscious experience. And there's just no way, once you've had a conscious experience, to rationally make sense of saying good is just the same as bad. Nobody does that. Even the sadist doesn't like something, finds something unpleasant. Just a fact. And this capacity to feel bad. Feeling bad is bad. So that's one of the comments in here. It's going to be some sort of feel bad thing. And it's no, it's not about feeling bad. It's about feeling bad being bad. How could it possibly matter if you say, I feel bad, if bad doesn't mean bad? If bad doesn't mean bad, then saying you feel bad wouldn't mean anything. Can't you understand this? You can't sit there and say the word bad doesn't have meaning, because then there's no point in saying it. And to say that there's no point in making a distinction between somebody feeling good and somebody bad is overtly ludicrous to somebody who feels. They know that there's every reason to recognize that difference. Anyway. Your conclusion does not follow from your premise. Well, first off, there's no conclusion in the video, dimwit. Yeah. There's no ought in the premises. So again, you're not arguing the fucking subject. Again, you're too stupid. I give you simple premises and I say, go ahead and try to dispute one of them. I don't think you can rationally. And then I'll get to the fucking oughts. I'm just saying these facts will fuck you in the ass if you're a nihilist. Okay? The facts of our biological reality are going to fuck you in the ass until your brain shapes up. Anyway. Your conclusion does not follow from your premise. You cannot logically derive an ought from an is. I say so. You're the Pope of logic, are you? I mean, I need a bong hit. I need a bong hit. Oh, that's just so clever. Ought implies a subjective goal status. It implies it? I mean, implies isn't a really great word. So you could say, you probably need a more conclusive word, because your argument is that the only way to get an ought is through a subjective goal. So it mandates a subjective goal status. Requires. There's some sort of rigidity, you're saying. And I don't believe in any of that, quite obviously. So anyway, this whole, even that term, subjective goal status. Meaning what? So nobody can ever understand a circumstance and derive an understanding of the goal being, like, say, something like fairness. I could say that in a contest, all I really care about is that it's fair. I don't have an interest in anybody winning, particularly. I just say, let's have a fair fight. Fair fights is a good idea. There's no subjective interest. There's just a rational understanding that cheating, okay, not fighting fair, is not good. And it's not just a subjective, I feel that way. It's a subjective, it's an intellectual understanding that this is part of the mechanics of it. It can't be a well-working clock if it has crooked gears in it. And cheating is a crooked gear. Alright, so I'll try to just read the crappy people's remarks. If you think that's what we ought to do, then you missed the point. Well, I guess you can't just read their idiotic comments because they don't contextualize them. No, but I think you missed the point, camouflage monkey guy. Because there's no point in you saying, if you think that's what we ought to do, then you missed the point. You're saying there is no point. All you're saying is there's no real value, there's just projected value. There's just artificially manufactured by humans a lie that we impose on reality. And there's no such thing as a truth we impose in reality. And I'm saying that's just idiotic. And I'm saying it's a truth, whether you like it or not, that my consciousness screams value. You're saying it has no meaning, value-wise. You're saying that I've been lied to, I'm deceived, that there is no real value difference between suffering and pleasure. No real value difference. That I could make zillions of suffering machines, or I could make zillions of pleasure machines. And from your perspective, there's no difference between those two universes. And again, none of you assholes have the courage to explain how that possible circumstance, and it is a possible circumstance, wouldn't make your philosophy ludicrous. Because it would. It makes your philosophy ludicrous. Okay. Ought does not imply a subjective goal. Oh, that's the good guy. No. Let's see. No, because my premise is new comment is the same thing in this society used to justify ethics encouraging heavy use of vaccination. No, I don't want to get into that shit. Alright, here we go. Actions and intentions don't rely entirely on pure descriptive claims and logical conclusions. That's all I'm saying. Well, it's not all you're saying. You're saying it can't. And especially you're saying it can't in value circumstances. So, I mean, this is just so stupid. I mean, quite obviously, nobody, I mean, that's all I'm saying, asshole, is that, yes, most of what our brain conjures up as valuable is nonsense, okay? The Pope is not smart. He's an idiot. He's an imbecile, okay? Baseball is stupid. I mean, you go down the list of all the misimpressions people have. And then colossal waste of calories and money. We should be building much better things with our money, like, I don't know, a solar plant than Shea Stadium or whatever, Yankee Stadium. It's a stupid waste of work and time. We should do something better with our time, just no doubt about it. It's just a stupid thing. So our descriptive claims are, most of them, for most people, are imbecilic. But that doesn't mean there isn't some of them, like evolution, that are quite coherent to reality, sensible, logical, rational, and derived through kind of a completely unemotional dissection of the mechanism. People make clocks. People make things, and they don't have orgasms while they're doing it. They don't have any personal interest. They just understand the mechanism, and they are following a blueprint, so to speak. They're just being guided through the process by a rational understanding that this big gear next to this half gear, they do the math and they figure out the two have to be, one has to be 1/2 the size of the other to slow down the rate of, whatever. I mean, it's mechanical, and they recognize the mechanics. And they accurately describe the mechanics and apply the mechanics. Alright, so bong hit bitch, idiot. That stupid whatever he is guy. I mean, I don't see all the comments, but some of these people are blocked, which is just so stupid. Do you even understand the objective-subjective dichotomy? She's asking the idiot guy. The goal is to punish in this scenario. The goal, as are all goals, subjective. The goal is inherently subjective. So she doesn't even understand that there's some people who understand what deterrence is, and they believe in criminal justice for the purpose of deterrence, and that even if we had captured Adolf Hitler after the war, they would say there's no reason to torture him. That's just another person being harmed. That's just more pain imposed. Because they'd say there's no way to, this is not a kind of crime you can create deterrence for. It's so catastrophic and monstrous. It's so insane. So there's really no point in torturing insane people. And there's no point because you won't be able to convey to insane people the sanity, okay, of this correction. They're not going to be deterred because they're crazy. You can't deter the crazy. Maybe. The desire of person C to punish person A is a subjective desire. Well, again, that's your characterization, and I don't believe your characterization in the first place. I think if you wrote these questions at all articulately, most people would say, yes, they like the idea of deterrence, and no, they don't like the idea of unnecessary suffering. So if I ask the questions correctly, people will answer the questions correctly. Of course it does. Give me one example. You ought to do X without being followed by if you want outcome Y. Of course it does. Give me one example of you ought to do X without it being followed by if you want outcome Y. Well, clearly there's a connection between oughts and facts, but again, if you just make the facts simple and just say unnecessary suffering. So all you have to do is figure out whether suffering has a benefit at all. Does the suffering prevent something else from suffering, which is a good, or does it create some good that some idiot thinks is a good? I don't think there are any other goods besides comforting the afflicted, but let's just say that that's the limit. You can analyze the circumstances and say, yes, this small amount of pain now will prevent a great deal of pain in the future, and that's how you derive the explanation, the cause, the goal. But it's not something you have any there's no subjective influence on the understanding or the mechanics. You're just building a watch. We often assume people's goals and don't bother stating them as an ought statement. Well, the fact that we have common understanding based on social indoctrination and based on the fact that we have to create all these fake rules, not about absolute right and wrong, right? I mean, it would be absolutely correct. If you knew somebody was going to rape somebody, it would be absolutely, and you knew it, I mean, accurately knew it, accurately could predict the future, and you murdered them, it would actually be a good thing. So, there's to prevent this harm maker from harming. So, if you knew the future, the fact is it would be right for you to break these social conventions. Because you can do it more efficiently. The social convention is inefficient because it doesn't it is assuming unknown variables. We can't know who's good and who's bad until they commit some act for which we can declare them good or bad. But if we could know ahead of time, it would be a different moral contract, ethical contract. You ought to lock your car if you don't want it to get stolen. Well, in a sense, you ought not to if you want to fix civilization, right? I mean, to have a civilization, you know, to have freedom, you have to exercise freedom, and you have to create a circumstance where you're not guilty because you didn't lock your car. The guy who went into your car without permission is guilty. So you have to either increase the punishment that comes with these violations. We have to say they're unacceptable. Maybe kill a few car thieves. I mean, you know, have a death penalty. You have to, if you want civilization, you have to defend civilization from the people who don't want it. People who don't have a personal interest in it, or too stupid to understand the value of civilization. So in a sense, saying you ought to lock your car, in a sense, I'd say that's only good for you personally. It's not good for society. It's like you ought to use a water filter. Well, technically, okay, we're better off if we have the expectation that our water being brought to our house isn't full of fucking toxic chemicals. And as soon as we start accommodating toxic chemicals, they'll feed us more of them. So, this is the scenario. So, but again, converting this conversation into these complex social circumstances is adding exactly the context. I have made like 10 videos in a row here, 12 maybe, going through 3 motherfucking premises to establish, look, just argue this shit. Okay, because once I establish this shit as the real shit, the rest of this shit is goddamn obvious. And I don't think you can rationally argue any of these conclusions. These factual descriptions of reality. I mean, you certainly can't say I'm illogical because unlike you, I'm not an idiot, and I don't pretend that feeling the worst day of my life was the same as the best day of my life. That there's no value difference between those 2 days. And that it would make perfectly good, rational sense, okay, for me to invert them for eternity. To just have me suffering the worst day of my life forever would be just as good as me having the best day of my life forever. You're saying that's a logically viable statement in your world. Now, in my experience, and in my knowledge base, that's ludicrous. So have the balls to stand up and say, you believe it's correct that if I were to manufacture 1 trillion yous and give them the worst day of your life forever, I've committed no crime. I have not been stupid. Go ahead, explain. What if I want to get it stolen? What's this? See, again, so this is the context crap, exactly the kind of nonsense you don't want to get into. You don't want to get into what you want. What we're trying to establish is not what people think they want or think they need. We're trying to establish what is the thing that really has value. And the thing that really has value is this suffering thing. So it's like the people jumping out of airplanes. It would probably, for no good reason, just to have fun. And it'd probably be good to be able to explain to people that this is just an entertainment, okay, and that you have other ways to entertain yourself besides flying around and taking the risk that you'll have catastrophic injuries which will cause you suffering and cause other people grief and expense. And that there's much cheaper ways to have a good time. I mean, really, go find somebody to play Naked Twister with or something. There are better, less dangerous entertainments. Jeez. Rationally. Understandable. Don't go upstream. Go back into the ocean and play Chinese checkers. That's not an objective... just masturbate, for fuck's sake. That's not an objective fact. It's an opinion. So, she's making claims, but she doesn't base them on anything. So this is the typical rhetoric of these people. They just say something. They don't base it on anything. Don't give you the argument. They just make a declarative statement. That's not an objective fact. Where's your proof? Subjective value judgment. That's easy to debunk. I just have to say it better... they do exist. Say it's better they do exist. You can say it, but again, arguing it is the problem. Where do the facts point? So we're back now to people's understanding of logic. And again, they think they've been instructed by idiots and imbeciles of the past that logic is some homunculus, it's some kind of thing. And it's not. It's just rules of doing math. And the rule is the plus sign can't switch to a minus sign, can't switch back to a plus sign, can't switch. No. Plus signs have to be plus signs, and equal signs have to be equal signs. And those are the rules. And then the rest of the rules are you don't do cardboard box plus 3 plus spinach plus 2. You can't do that. So you can't make huge category errors. Your numbers have to be in the same category. They have to be the same things that you're adding and for the equal sign. But that's it. That's logic. Logic's doing rational math. Nothing else. Okay. Let's see. That's okay. What a butt-hurt moron you are. Is that all you got? Did my logic and facts make you feel foolish? Yeah, yeah, sure. I need a bong hit. Oh, hilarious. Of course it does. Let's see. Give me an example. You ought to act followed by... Okay. You ought to prevent suffering. So that's the reaction to that statement. If I want to get it stolen, what's our subjective? Wants are subjective. They are dependent on a mind. Yeah, I don't know exactly where he's going with that part, but it doesn't matter. Let's just get to this part. Alright, I ought to prevent suffering if I want. Well, again, preventing suffering is just saying, just get rid of the word suffering and saying bad. Okay. Negative. The destruction of value. I mean, you could qualify it by saying unnecessary suffering, because that would be intrinsically bad, or unredeemed bad experience. And that ought, in my opinion, is one of the true oughts, because it's based on this idea that bad is a real thing, and to be a real thing, that's exactly what your reaction has to be. See, there can't be such a thing as a bad if your reaction to it is exactly the same as your reaction to absolutely nothing. You can't say 0 is the same as -5. You can't do that. That's not rational to the math. So if you establish the existence of a bad, it has to be a negative number. It has to be one of those minus sign things. Or you might as well just throw the word away and just say, I'm going to pretend there's good and there's nothing. But there's no such thing as a real bad. There's just less good. And that's what I'm trying to get to with my simple premises, is that's not how I experience consciousness. I do not think when I'm suffering, oh, this is less good. No. I understand this is bad. It's consuming the value of anything good that ever happened in my existence. And in some cases, it can be so extremely bad that everything good that ever happened to me in my entire life could become valueless because of this huge expense in bad. The bad number is so big, it just consumes anything that could possibly have been an asset, a plus number, in my existence. I'm sure I can create a scenario, of some negative condition. Even just saying, look, you can relive your life, but we're going to pile on 100 years of torture. So you can have exactly the same life you lived, do it again, and we're going to torture you for 100 years. I think most people would say, I'm not doing that. That would be really dumb to step into that mess. Alright. Why ought I prevent suffering? It's because it's intrinsically bad. Because it's intrinsically not nothing. It's something, and it's not just not good. It's bad. It's not unpositive. It's negative. That's why. Because you don't personally and subjectively like the idea of suffering. No, because I understand through personal experience sensations, and I have tasted them. And pain and suffering taste like bad. It is bad. It is a negative condition. It is a destructive to value condition. It is the antithesis of anything that could be called positive. It is a deficit. By its very nature, a bad thing. It's intrinsically a negative, deprived, insufficient condition. Your subjective goal state is not to have anything experience suffering. Your subjective goal state is not to have anything experience suffering. No. I mean, right off the bat, you could just argue that, well, yeah, I mean, I suppose fundamentally, I mean, I've made this argument before, we can't really escape the idea that what we understand to be the truth, if we're an honorable person, will end up being something we're a slave to. I mean, once you understand what truth is, and that falsehood is the bad, that if there's good and bad labels can be associated with truth, that an honest, accurate description is not the same as a dishonest, inaccurate description. And the difference is a value difference. Fundamentally. The difference wouldn't mean anything if it's not a value difference. How else to put this? I mean, accurate and inaccurate. It's just fundamental. It's intrinsic to these words and the concept. Accurate is correct, and inaccurate is incorrect. So it's just fundamentally incorrect for there to be suffering that isn't redeemed by some positive. So yes, my subjective goal is the same as my objective understanding, only because I value the truth. Obviously, rationally, sensibly, logically. You can't build a watch that works if you don't obey the laws of physics. And the laws of our value matrix are just as real. What if someone murdered my children and I desire to make them suffer? You see how subjective that is? Well, I mean, quite obviously anybody has already considered that. But again, that's the real challenge of being an honorable person. Are you a hypocrite or are you not a hypocrite? So yes, if you murder out of revenge, you might not be doing anything any better than the murderer. Maybe the murderer was getting revenge against something your grandfather did, and he thought it was appropriate that, yes, somehow the family should pay, that the family money is the evil. And so, yeah, I could see that as being rational. I mean, you know, the Rothschilds, from my perspective, are all evil just because their entire fortune was made on evil, and they've maintained control and illegitimate ownership of the world based on fundamentally evil maneuvering they did hundreds of years ago. It's not only just blood money, it's just as goddamn evil as you can get. And so their descendants who accept that inheritance, they pick up that dirty sword, you know, they should get what they deserve. You have to be at the religious level of denying obvious reality in order to be a moral absolutist. So that's your contention. And clearly, why? The Pope says so again. You don't rationally argue how that is anything close to an obligation. There's nothing religious about evolution. You're basically saying for a salmon to say, hey, swimming upstream would be me being owned by a DNA molecule. I'm not going to do that. You'd say he needs religion. No, all he needs is knowledge of how he's being manipulated. And again, you're saying that all morals are subjective nonsense. They're all projections, like I want the Mets to win the World Series, and that none of them have any kind of intrinsic or objective logical component. And I'm arguing, of course they do. It's perfectly logical for people to be afraid of hell, if there was such a thing. Morals are subjective, deal with it. Yeah, that's a real rational argument. Yeah, you've really defended that with evidence. Your evidence is what? Nietzsche says so? I mean, really. All value is subjective. All value is made up. That's what you're saying. All value has no core foundational reality. There's no such thing as a good or bad event in the universe. That's what you're saying. And again, from my perspective, that just becomes ludicrous as soon as I create some scenario where bad stuff happens and it has no redeeming good. And then you're just sitting there looking at it saying, there's no possible way that could be the same as a neutral condition. There's just no way. Like again, I'll take 1 trillion of your clones, clone you exactly as you are now, with same personality, same mindset, same understanding. I'll take 1 trillion of those and just torture them forever. And you'd say, I've done exactly nothing. I'd say you're an idiot. A colossal idiot, and a preposterous idiot. Anyway, here's a nice long one. If you can't distinguish fact from opinion, it absolutely boggles my mind, because this is not a difficult thing. Well, you're saying that the distinguishing thing between fact and opinion is all statements or opinions, and you're saying there's no fact of value. You're saying I've been deceived by my sensual experience, and that there is only one value. There's good and not good, but there's no such thing as bad. Babies are valuable is your subjective opinion. Well, I've already known that. This are really saying is because I personally value babies, I don't want to feel sad or guilty. Then in order not to feel sad and guilty, I ought to not to kill babies. Well, clearly that's probably not what she's saying. But clearly we use this notion of some violation of innocence as a way of describing bad. Now we could use just plain suffering, but it doesn't work on most people because most people are sadistic lunatics in the sense that you can just see that in their food choices. What if you don't value babies, like valuing the welfare of a pig? I assume, again, if somebody doesn't value the welfare of a pig, it doesn't change the fact that the pig is tormented at all. It doesn't change the fact that the torment happened. I assume human babies, rabbits tell me rabbit babies are objectively more valuable than human babies. So again, you really think that we're not human beings have this big brain, and we have split the atom, but we can't figure out our core bigotries. That we can't understand a word like nepotism. Say, oh yes, I'm guilty of that. Yeah, it's a problem, but yeah, I can get around it. I can understand that even though I do love my family members more than regular people walking the street, that's just a bigotry. And I can understand that when push really came to shove, I shouldn't act on that, because it's a cheat of reality. They're not better than the other people, and just as I'm not better than the other people. And I have to understand that. You're saying you can't do that? You can't temper your bigotry? Of course we can. What if the goal was to traumatize yourself? So you come up with a completely insane goal, and it would be called insane. What about the fact that by killing a baby you are merely speeding up the inevitable, preventing of suffering that you're being in the long run? Yeah, but that also presumes that the baby doesn't have some fundamental vitalness, in the sense that it may potentially cure cancer or something. What if the baby is dying in pain and is all you can do? Whatever. I mean, again, these are all these conditional circumstances that have to do with trade-offs between differing kinds of value, and there's really no point, in my opinion, getting into these subjects when what we're really just trying to do is argue the existence of core value. You're claiming no core value exists, so quit arguing these idiotic thought experiments and just argue with my statement that I experience consciousness, and my experience of consciousness is that the sensations are intrinsically valuable. They're intrinsically good and bad. There is no, I don't get to make a judgment about them. It happens as good and bad. That's the way the feelings come. There is no interpretation. I do not interpret them. They are what they are. They are the essence of good and bad. That is a subjective value judgment. Again, says you. It's your opinion. There's nothing intrinsic about it. So again, by that definition, it's all neutral. And it is rational, in your opinion, for somebody to create 1 trillion of you and torture them forever. Because it's just as good as anything else. The suffering of others is bad, subject to your mind. Well, again, this whole idea that you can say that suffering is no different than nothing, and apparently good is no different than nothing, is an abolishment of all of reality, really. I mean, there's just no rational way to acknowledge the existence of consciousness, the existence of sentient experience. Okay, say yes, it exists, but it doesn't. That's all you're saying, because everything about it creates this value sense. That's the entire sense of feeling, having a qualitative feeling. The entire thing, that's what it's exactly doing, is creating value. And you're denying its basic functions. So you might as well just say feelings don't happen, which is, in my opinion, silly. You're really just assuming my goal state is to please you. That doesn't mean anything. The statement is you should prevent the suffering of other beings if you want to please Wrigley. No. So that's your characterization. And again, I'm going to argue that if that's what you're going to say I'm saying, well, that's silly. I don't give a shit about being pleased. I give a shit about, does it make sense? And I'm saying I can't make sense of this denial of the difference. Me imagining myself being tortured forever in no way seems at all the same as me being pleasured forever. I cannot possibly put those two things in the same value category, and they seem inescapable that that's the category they're in. There's no other category they belong in than one called relevant to value. FYI, I don't care about your subjective opinions. Yeah, well, you know, that, again, who cares about this caring part? But obviously, yes, I wouldn't care if you got run over in traffic in a most horrific way, because I would just say, well, if somebody had to do it, it's good it was him. Yeah, because that person sucks entirely. Fortunately for you, however, I don't share your subjective values. I don't know which ones of his, I do share your subjective values, but let's not pretend they are intrinsic property of the fabric of reality. So again, he's saying the fabric of reality doesn't have as a component in it the fact that there is an intrinsic qualitative value difference between feeling bad and feeling good. Suffering is bad for no intrinsic, is no more intrinsic than hip-hop is bad. So a universe full of hip-hop, with nobody listening to it, is the same as a universe full of a suffering, tormented consciousness. I don't think so. The only difference is popularity of opinion. Well, again, that's your lie, your bold assertion based on no rational evidence explaining how there's no real difference between the worst day of your life and the best day of your life. Your argument is there's no real difference between those two things, because the only real difference there could be would have to be a value difference. And that's your argument. And I think it's a ludicrously silly argument. Continued. Oh, regarding punishment. Well, this is a subject there's no point in getting out. I'm not talking about deterring them. Well, see, that's the whole point. You're not talking about what most people understand. I really do believe most people understand that the first objective of the justice system is to deter people from committing crime. They understand that if you don't have a law against murder, people will murder, because they imagine themselves, if there's no law against it, I'm going to run that fucker over. I mean, really, if I saw you on the sidewalk and I'm in a perfectly good car capable of running people over and there was no law against it, yeah, I'd say, gee, let's take out some shit. I mean, that thing can do nothing but bad on this planet because it doesn't know what a bad is. I mean, it conceptually can't understand there's a real bad. That's a dangerous piece of shit running around. So, yeah, but everybody understands. I mean, I think everybody understands that if they didn't have a law against murder, if you didn't pay for it in terms of some unpleasantness, we'd all take out the garbage. We'd all do some cleaning, as the pros say. Just dropped something. Non-vital. No sentient harm involved. Except for me having to bend over. Alright, anyway. Let's see. Feel good for would feel good to me. You see, subject to suffering. You see, subject to my mind, their suffering is good. Their opinion would be different, subject to their mind. So she's saying it would, in her subject to her mind, suffering to people, causing suffering to people who have committed crimes is good. Where rational people would argue it's a necessary bad. You have to do it or you won't have civilization. Regarding moral absolutists, sorry, the term I should have used to be accurate is moral objectivism. No, moral is an idiotic word, and what you should use is something like value realism. If Sam Harris said that Sam Harris was wrong, well, yeah, here's this argument. Sam Harris has argued in the moral landscape that there are things that are just, you can't rationally claim aren't bad, like vomiting every 5 minutes forever. I'm claiming you have religious level, I'm claiming you have a religious levels of deluded. Yeah, well, I'm claiming that's nonsense coming from somebody who's religiously and dogmatically saying, I, the devil, say there's no such thing as bad. Yeah, you're just as, I mean, you're the deluded one. To claim there's no value there's no truth regarding the economics of our existence is silly. You don't have to be religious. I'm just illustrating the scope of your denial. No, you're the one in denial, right? You're denying, you're a nihilist denying the existence of bad and saying it doesn't exist intrinsically in the mechanism of the sentient welfare, and that it is in fact just as good to torture something as it is to please it, which is ludicrous on its face from my personal experience. There's absolutely no way that could make sense to me, rationally, having experienced sensation. No possible way to make that make sense. The usage of comparative like better beings about a wishful conclusion. The usage of comparative like better beings about a wishful conclusion, not a premise. I don't know what the brings about a wishful conclusion, not a premise. The usage of a compare like better brings about a wishful conclusion. Well, again, yes, it may be wishful, but why is it wishful? Oh, because it's better. So again, that's just saying a better conclusion. Using a comparative like better brings about a better conclusion, not a premise. Yes, it's a premise that there are conditions and things are in better and lesser conditions. So again, you're just arguing that somehow you can't tell the difference between a trillion. If I was to torture a trillion of you forever, you couldn't raise your hand and say, I have a logical objection. You couldn't recognize, you couldn't make me a logical argument to me explaining why that would not be a good idea. You just have to concede. Well, it's true, it doesn't mean anything, so go ahead. No. In all its adjunct non-justification of one-sided paradigmatic causality where subjectively is the happening, last perception of the paramount in causal totality. I love these words, these totality. A human consciousness is of boundary inclusive in all its sensory deprived experiences and constructs. Well, all this jibber jabber doesn't have anything to do with the fact that I'm conscious, shithead. I mean, really, it's just no point. The only redeeming thing from this stupid Earth Day shithead is this is a pretty funny joke. Jesus can walk on water. Cucumbers are 90% water. I can walk on cucumbers. I am 97% Jesus. Yeah, it's a good little joke, but it's just a joke, and you're an idiot. Oh man, this is getting tiresome, isn't it? Yeah, 57 minutes. Okay, so I would probably. I mean, I could get to. I want to get to this, but. Alright, well, I'll do this. Not sure if Einstein ever wrote about logic. My point wasn't that Einstein wrote about logic. My point is Einstein wrote about physics, and he's entirely wrong. Okay, so the God of physics was wrong, in my opinion. I think I can prove it. That's what I was saying. So Einstein isn't an authority on physics. And what I'm saying is any of your idiotic authorities on logic who aren't saying that logic doesn't really mean anything. It's just the rules of a fair game. It's a way to allow facts to point to the truth. That's it. Facts will point in a direction. The direction they should point in is the truth. Logic will help you get the facts to point to the truth because you won't make mistakes. You won't do things antithetical to the rational connection of the facts. And when you rationally connect the facts, it's like rationally connecting dots. If you rationally understand that you don't go from this dot all the way around the world to this dot, that you just make the straightest line, then you'll understand how to play the game of connect the dots. Fucking idiot. I never read a single page of a book on logic either, but if I want to know where to look for Bertrand Russell, like, you know, this is, yeah, let's just keep pulling all the old artifacts. Let's just keep, why don't you dig up skeletons and beat mankind with them as if there's no better way to do it. Thomas Jefferson went to the bathroom in an outhouse, okay? It's just a fact. Yes, he had some concept of what civilization might look like, but he had no concept of what of being able to engineer a system that would migrate into a future where we have digital technology and all kinds of, you know, brilliant things that we should be applying. And because you stupid idiots can't ever grow up and say, yeah, well, let's make a toilet and flush it instead. Everything stays outhouse, okay? These outhouse notions of right and wrong are reality. Look, we know we're evolved organisms now, okay? I'm not saying Bertrand Russell didn't know that. I'm just saying the key component of understanding philosophy is first understanding psychology and saying psychology should have nothing to do with it. And I would certainly argue that my psychological subjective interpretations of my circumstances have nothing to do with my commentary regarding the single fact that I have two states of feeling, good and bad. Yes, lots of states in between, lots of states on the fence, but decidedly there are two main conditions, which are I don't feel good, I feel bad, and I don't feel bad, I feel okay or good. That's it. Opposite things, described by their oppositeness to each other. So in that sense they're circular, just as negative negates positive in mathematics. These names are all over the place, but you can also get a halfway accurate. So you're the authority. You're making judgments about the icons. So it's like you declaring who the Pope should be. So you're better than the Pope. You have a greater connection to God, and so you even understand, hey, you Pope people, you picked the wrong Pope because that guy should have been the Pope. Yeah, sure you are. Understanding of what logic is and what it is not, just by reading Wikipedia. Again, I don't need you, idiot. Okay, I'm saying my rational description of what logic is, facts pointing to facts, is all the explanation. It fulfills the task of describing it. And again, the rules of logic, if you understand those, they're simple, are fundamentally understandable. Contradictions, lies, all kinds of things, category errors, these things will break the coherentness of the facts. So yes, you cannot add cardboard boxes to banana cream pie. If you don't like reading, I'm sure you can watch some YouTube video. I'm sure you can shove your own head way the fuck up your own ass. There's no excuse for you having done that already. And again, I have read, and I've made my public critiques, and you're not arguing with my argument. You're just saying that somehow I'm wrong. Well, whoop-de-fucking goddamn do. Some turd shit who talks in acronyms is going to tell me what reality is? Fuck you. Nobody expects you to become an expert on logic. Well, I expect you to be at least a civil human being and not try this pretentious nonsense. I win because I say so. I'm smarter than you because I say so. Fuck you. God, what a fucking cunt. You gutless cunt. Can't make a video on any subject, right? You have no videos on no subjects. You gutless wonder. Anyway, he's so stupid he doesn't know that logic is a formally studied subject. Well, again, here we go again. Alright, so I can't use the word logic, right? Because that belongs to this archaic notion of what it is to be, to rationally mix facts. So for me to apply it to the same kind of idea of a trial, and that you're testing